Okay, we're good to go.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, City Councillors, and members of staff. My name is Keith Yamwanzia, and I'm the President and CEO of the Guelph Chamber of Commerce. We're pleased to be here today to offer the business voice and to play an active role as a dynamic solutions provider so as to build a stronger, more robust economy and community here in Guelph. To that end, we have followed the budget process closely. The Guelph Chamber of Commerce, as I've mentioned before, is a member-driven organization with over 900 members, representing more than 30,000 employees. We have received the national accreditation with distinction and are proud to be the champion of the business community here in Guelph. It is our mission to set the national standard for community prosperity. Tonight's presentation has been informed not only by that mission, but by the Chamber's research and consultation with businesses of all sizes and business professionals with backgrounds in finance, accounting, and business management. In addition, it has been informed by the robust commentary from our economic leadership forums, roundtables, and input we heard at the Guelph Economic Summit earlier this year. As noted each year, the community-driven budget process embraced by city staff and members of council demonstrates ongoing commitment to support meaningful stakeholder engagement and further solidifies our brand as a community that conducts robust engagement and implements stakeholder recommendations. The finances of a municipality play an important role in building a competitive environment that attracts and retains businesses and talent. A central objective of the Chamber's continued involvement in the municipal budget process is to ensure that the municipal public finance decisions are made with a lens of sound financial principles that balances a community's range of services and a community's ability to pay and remain competitive as an investment and growth location. It is with that in mind that the Chamber is recommending the following considerations. 1. Workforce mobility plays an important role in the ability for a community to remain competitive and ensure sustained, robust growth. Transit, therefore, is an important part of the ecosystem of competitiveness and plays an important role when it comes to business and economic development decision-making. Given the budget pressures that the transit budget has faced, the Chamber is recommending a route review be conducted so that there is a greater consideration for the connection of Guelph's industrial and manufacturing areas as part of an evolved and modernized model. This review should be conducted with a view to develop an action plan that will establish a responsive and evolved transit system. In addition, this review should ensure that all service delivery efficiency options and technologies are considered, including private sector solutions. Lastly, this review should take into full consideration the ongoing advocacy efforts by both the City and Chamber for all-day two-way GO Transit and how optimizing local transit and connectivity can further strengthen that case. For us to continue to be Canada's jobs powerhouse, we must respond effectively to the needs of businesses and their ability to get their teams to work. 2. Government of all levels are redoubling their efforts to provide relief for small and medium-sized enterprise. As a city, it is important to ensure this momentum is not stifled by passing a budget that could raise property taxes higher than the rate of inflation. While successive city budgets have not been able to remain within the rate of inflation due to one-time policy changes like the infrastructure tax, it is important now to examine closely the overall cost of doing business in Guelph and the city's role in ensuring Guelph remains a competitive place to do business vis-à-vis property taxes. There are a number of policy tools available to Council to ensure that this year's budget is an inflation budget. These include monies made available via increased assessment, monies made available via a policy decision on vacant property rebate program, and monies made available via savings from conducted service reviews. While the City has a range of decisions to make this evening, I would say that you consider the lens that I mentioned, which is one that focuses on our ability to remain competitive as a community and how employers will be impacted and their employees. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much, Keith Yeo. Is there any questions at this time? See, oh, sir, Councillor Salisbury.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just have one question with regards to route reviews and incorporation of private sector solutions. Private sector solutions with regards to route reviews, what are you referring to?
Well, as part of the route review, we've said that we don't think that anything should be off the table when it comes to what might be included as part of that review. Private sector solutions could include anything from engaging directly with employers and seeing how you might be able to run a special route that would accommodate a large workforce that might be in a particular part of the community.
And I think I saw Councillor Hoffman. Yep, is next.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Guthrie. Just following up on that, Keithio, so when you were mentioning the route reviews, did you have one specific route review in mind, for example, the Hanlon Creek Business Park?
Well, I mean, that's the purpose of a route review. So rather than mention one specific route, I would certainly add that to the list. But on the whole, it is where are individuals, where is Guelph's talent living, and how are they able to get to their places of work in a meaningful way, and in a way that allows them appropriate connections, and in a way that allows them to be able to arrive to work on time and keep their job and have a quality of life. So I don't want to nitpick routes, but I would say that there is a need for a route review to be able to look at the entire system and see how demographic changes, where employers have located, all needs to be considered as part of that route review.
I would agree with you, Keithio, and I know that we are undertaking a service review on transit, I believe starting in January or February of next year. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's when that's coming forward. My second question, through you, Mayor Guthrie, you mentioned cost of inflation. Would that cost of inflation include the 1% dedicated tax levy for infrastructure, or would that cost of inflation include the dedicated tax levy for infrastructure?
So, you know, I know that it was reported earlier today that reported in the newspaper earlier today that that the mayor had put forward a means of separating those two using using surpluses. You know, not knowing the intricacies of the policies, I wouldn't want to necessarily put one particular offer on the table. But you know, you know the Chamber's position on the infrastructure tax, and you know how it augmented budget last year. And what I've said is that this has been successive budgets where it has been far above inflation. When other governments around Canada, both federal and provincial, and city governments are looking to support businesses, being able to have an inflation budget in this year is particularly important to maintain that competitiveness.
Thank you for that. And could you confirm with me the businesses, how they do feel about the 1% infrastructure dedicated tax levy?
You know, I presented the position of the business community last year, and we had talked about you know, what the impact would have been. You had a cumulative policy decision that would impact the business community and the cost of doing business in Guelph. That was a policy decision made for a number of reasons. There was a wastewater backlog, and excuse the pun, but there was a wastewater backlog and a number of policy decisions that had to be taken last year. I mentioned that in my presentation today, where this council was faced with those difficult policy decisions to make in previous years, but we've had successive budgets over the last 4 years that have been far above inflation, and it's been felt by the business community. And I've mentioned in previous presentations where they've had to make changes on technology purchases, have had to make changes on hiring because of those above inflation increases, and it has slowed them down in their ability to be competitive in what is you know, a global marketplace.
I appreciate your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. Through you to Mr. Mwanzia from the Chamber. Mr. Mwanzi, I appreciate your comments with regards to workforce mobility. Absolutely, hands down, that needs to be something that that all levels of government deal with. Locally, with regards to transit, I'm struggling a bit, and I'll ask Mr. Spicer about this a little bit later on as well, because I'm suffering a bit of a paradox here, that you talk about relief for small and medium business, and yet at the same time we're looking at reviewing of routes to make certain that there's greater route flexibility or availability with to our industrial sector, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I've been in many talks with Mr. Estel about even the possibility of getting buses out to Guelph-Aramasa. But the real problem there is I'm just having a difficulty juxtaposing relief for small and medium businesses with looking at for all intents and purposes, what seems to be an increase in transit routes, and I don't know how to juggle those two issues.
So, you know, as I said to your fellow councillor, you know, I don't think I would automatically jump to talking about more routes. That's the purpose of a route review. That's the purpose of a service review. That's the purpose of saying, are we able to, you know, it was great to have the neighborhood coalition here to present to us that the delivery of services is done in a number of ways in our community, and how are we able to do that effectively. So to the extent that a route review automatically means additional routes and additional cost and expense versus looking at the delivery of that service and being able to do it smartly, you know, that's the purpose of a route review, and that's why we think that has value. But there does have to be those considerations on efficiency, on technology, and on private sector solutions. I mean, to the extent that you might have a for-profit or not-for-profit provider that might be able to do X, Y, Z as part of the transit system, those all need to fall within consideration of that route review.
And certainly I respect that. I just noticed that Greyhound, for example, as a private sector deliverer, is having more and more difficulty with delivering efficiently and effectively and cheaply. I think we can do it well in Guelph, and I think we are doing it well. I hope that we will continue to consider that our first and foremost priority. Thank you.
Councillor Gibson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Keith. That was well said. The transit's been discussed, so I'll just lead credence to the staff so far. They're focusing it on, from my perspective, they're focusing our transit more on demand management and demand supply type of approach. So I think that's keen opportunity for the chamber to get together with our staff and talk about those issues. My question to you is, I'm going to go broad and then coming back to the municipality. So you mentioned upper levels of government. There are changes, obviously, to labor laws and minimum wage and things like that that our businesses in town are facing for next year. But I don't want to focus on that so much as I want to focus on competitiveness. So we are experiencing a sort of an increased level of investment in Canada. We're in sort of a prolonged investment cycle with the economy going the way it is. Can you just speak to the importance of us maintaining that competitiveness as a jobs powerhouse and not losing sight of the tax issue, right? So we want to have businesses looking in at Guelph, seeing a welcome environment in terms of a tax perspective. Can you speak to the importance of maintaining that competitiveness?
Yeah, I've said this several times from this podium about not being complacent. We are the jobs powerhouse, but you know, the formula for businesses to think about continued investment in our community does include our competitiveness when it comes to property taxes. It includes a whole host of things, including transit, as we brought forward, getting their people to work and so on. But from the perspective of property taxes, we can't lose sight of the fact that that is still a consideration within the formula, and the formula to make investment decisions. And when you look at that pro forma for Guelph, and you look at the successive years where there has been you know, twice inflation increases in property taxes for industrial and commercial, well, for everybody, but impacting, of course, disproportionately industrial and commercial based on tax ratios. You know, that's a consideration for investment, and we can't continue to fare poorly when that pro forma is done. And that's why we've talked about successive budgets. We understand the one-time drivers that led to those twice inflation budgets, but now, as those policy decisions are now behind this council, you're able to move forward with an inflation budget, which you know, to put colloquially, has been a long time coming, right?
Thank you very much.
And Councillor Wetstein.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just want to check one comment around the assessment growth, rebate policies, and service review. I assume you are on top of the fact that all of those are already included in our base budget? That the number we're working at to try to get down from 4.44, those things have already been subtracted from that. So we have to go beyond that, if I understand you correctly, which, if you're dealing with inflation, means we got to find service cuts for about 3%, which is about $7 million.
So I mean, those policy decisions have been
Right.
baked in, and you know, council can say, you know, with a single motion, we're going to proceed forward with what has been presented as base, and not think of anything outside of that. So that is council's decision. That is your decision.
Right.
You wanted the job, so you're going to have to, you campaign for it. So you're going to have to parse over those decisions and make them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Some days I don't want the job, but today I do. I actually enjoy this part of the job because it is the biggest challenge, and it is the one that we all are working to keep the city what it is, and that what you've acknowledged and we all acknowledge, pretty good city to work in. We do have a significant tax challenge this year again. I'm simply raising the point that in order for us to achieve that number, which I think we'd all like to achieve, the chamber, as well as the rest of the public, does need to realize that we will have to cut services by about $7 million. And those services will affect the chamber's ability to attract businesses. Are you concerned about that?
So, I mean, I haven't come up with that calculation, so I don't know how close your $7 million number is. So I won't speak necessarily to that $7 million number. All I can speak to, though, is that council has made a number of policy decisions over the last number of years that I've heard reaction from the business community about. And for businesses that have head offices outside of our community that you know, have to go before a board of directors and represent a pro forma for why this is an investment destination, you know, the escalating cost of doing business vis-a-vis property taxes is a factor that has to be mitigated for us. And unfortunately, at times, the decisions are made around a boardroom table that may not necessarily reflect that this is a great place to live and work, but maybe based solely, I mean, you used to be in business, and I'm sure you made some decisions solely on a pro forma that you saw that the numbers simply just didn't add up in terms of making an investment decision outside of other soft factors like quality of life and great place to be. So we have to think about the way that we do things in that reality, and that is a reality that I've regularly tried to present to council because it is what I've heard, and want to be able to express that to you when we come before you to talk about the business community concerns about successive twice inflation council budgets.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and that is a challenge, and we're going to take it on. I'll tell you where the 7 comes. 1% is $2.3 million, and the difference between 4.5 and 1.5 is 3%. That's how I get my $7 million.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's no more questions other than just a follow-up from me, which, as you do know and you've acknowledged, Councillor Hoffman brought it up as well as a reminder that we are starting the transit service review. Would you agree that we should look to make sure that that review is completed before looking to try to add and nitpick and find our favorite routes or your favorite routes, or that we should wait for the service review to be accomplished first?
Yes, I mean that's the whole point, right?
Yeah.
It's to be able to look at this comprehensively, rethink our demographic, rethink why it is that the service exists and who it serves, and then make a decision based on that due diligence. There's no to sort of do an a la carte pre-service selection process would not be very efficient.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And this year we have Anne from Innovation Guelph, Grow Guelph, I think, or not. Oh, she was here earlier. I saw her. No, okay, sorry. So we're going to go to Shirley Silvazzi. Okay. Pat Fung. Is Christine Hazen here? Great, you're going to be next, okay? Thanks, Christine. Welcome, Pat.
Hi, thank you for having me here. I've got a slide or two. Do they go right side up or upside down? Okay, I'm going to follow along the theme that previous people have expressed up here, living within our means, trying to keep the tax increase down below inflation. I believe Guelph has an operating cost problem, and I've got a couple of comparisons here. One of them is to the city of Barrie, which is a single-tier city like Guelph. It's about the same age, has about the same population and the same area as Guelph. Barrie spent, in 2016, $30 million less in operating costs than us. They spent $366, we spent $396, a difference of $30 million. So I believe there's room within our spending to juggle our dollars so that we come up with something similar to Barrie. Barrie's customer service surveys were similar to ours. People were happy with what was being spent in Barrie. We're spending, on a per-person basis, just a little over $3,000 a citizen. Barrie was spending just under $2,600 a citizen. The Barrie citizens were happy with the level of service in Barrie. I don't see why Guelph couldn't be happy with the same level of service. The cost per square kilometer in Barrie, there was about a $900,000 difference. We were spending more for the same area. Our taxes were more than Barrie by $10 million, even though we're a smaller city. Our salaries and benefits, $45 million more than Barrie for about the same size city. The cities were founded, Barrie was founded in 1833, Guelph in 1827. We're spending in Guelph $1,500 per person, per citizen for salary, and Barrie's spending $1,100. It's about a 40% difference. Same thing on taxes, it's a 13% difference. So what I'm suggesting is that for the infrastructure, which seems to be important to everybody, that we shift our dollars from operating costs to infrastructure. If infrastructure is that important to us, we can't continue to keep increasing the taxes in the city. And as Councillor Hoffman said in a recent meeting about the capital expenses in the council chambers, he said that money could be better spent elsewhere, and that's what I'm suggesting here. Perhaps our operating costs could be better spent elsewhere, i.e. infrastructure. Councillors should apply the same logic to the $3.2 million in expansions into the infrastructure. You've been saying all along that the infrastructure is a priority, therefore I think we have to make it a priority. We have to reduce operating expenses and substitute it with infrastructure. Why does Guelph have so many more people in its expense base compared with Barrie to service approximately the same number of people? And there are other data points. If you look at the BMA, for a city our size of $130,000, for fire we're spending $4 million more, waste collection almost $5 million more, waste disposal, $3.3 million more, waste diversion, $6 million more, library, it goes on and on. Those items alone add up to about $32 million. The waste statistics reported by BMA seem to be at odds with the earlier public report by Dillon Consulting, stating that Guelph waste costs are on a par with other cities. There's clearly a discrepancy in the reports. Why? How can two consultants show such a discrepancy? Why did the city choose the Dillon statistics over the BMA statistics? According to the 2016 Public Sector Salary Survey, Guelph has in its fire department 8 platoon chiefs in training, costing $1.1 million salary. And that does not include pensions and other non-taxable benefits, which would bring the amount to $1.4 million. We're spending $4 million more in fire than most other cities. The Fraser Institute, a well-known institute out west, says that the incidence of fire has been reducing over the years, yet our fire costs are increasing. I don't understand why. We could take money from the fire department and put it towards infrastructure. City management should be able to go through the areas identified above in the chart and reduce or reallocate. Will it? If not, why not? City management is not managing our resources. It merely comes back to the taxpayers and ratepayers for more money each time it wants to do something. One goal contained in the city's administrative plan is managing our resources to achieve maximum public value. Where is the demonstrated value Guelph is getting from its high administrative costs? Where is the management of resources demonstrated? Thank you.
And thank you for your presentation. Is there any questions from Mr. Fung? Okay, Councillor Gibson.
Yes, thank you through Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Fung. So I won't speak to any one particular point just because I agree with some, don't agree with others, but I do agree on principle on the weight of evidence, that you're supporting. You may or may not know, but back in 2015, I entered into a similar investigation, and some of the things that you haven't pointed out is medium household incomes, average household incomes, the average home costs.
I only have 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's okay, but it's all there, right?
Yeah.
So to many of your points, I'm going to lay credence because I think that there is some weight of evidence there that we need to investigate as an organization. I've been speaking about that for a while. My comment is, have you broadened that to, I know Barrie is such an easy comparison, have you broadened that to any other communities?
Well, I tried to do it through the BMA report, but the BMA report it's got like everything under the sun in there, and trying to pick and choose through that list is very onerous and time consuming. So I went through a number of the FIR reports on the municipal website. Barrie seemed like a good comparator. It was a single tier city. It's about the same size as us, about the same area. It's about the same age. It seemed like a fairly representative.
With similar incomes,
yeah,
similar distance to Toronto. I know I've seen it all. So
That's right.
My question is, I guess a few years ago, some of the issues I found with the comparison was just how deep a dive I needed to go. But I think in the context of the budget and some of the questions you've raised, and if you don't mind, I don't know if you circulated your submission to council.
It's
in the package? Okay.
It's in
so
the package.
What I'll do is I'll commit to putting some of your questions on the budget board because I would like to hear staff's response to some of those. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. It's just really, I think it's a point of privilege or point of order, just for Mr. Fung's benefit. Because of our protocol, I might be asking staff questions later about your report, just in case that you do leave. I understand there was some concern the last time that you had presented that you had left and then questions had been asked. So I wanted to make certain that you knew that I will be asking questions.
Fine.
Nothing else. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
So Christine, you are here, and Steve, I know I see you up in the corner. You're in the wings. Hi, Christine.
Hi,
Welcome.
thanks. Well, good evening, Mayor Guthrie, Council, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to me this evening. With the lack of a local newspaper this year, I hadn't really heard anything about Guelph Transit's place in the 2018 budget. This troubled me because transit is often cut back when the city needs to save money, and I know we need to save money, so I wanted to come out and say something. I came this evening assuming that it is time to argue against cutbacks and for better service. I hadn't heard that there was a review in process, and I'm glad to hear that that is going on because we definitely need it. Just reviewing the system as happened with the main line, it made a big difference there. There's at least one route now with frequent service, and it allows people to get across the city relatively quickly. And from what I've heard, ridership is up from this time last year, showing that convenience is important to people. But the downside, of course, is that many of the routes are operating less frequently, making it a challenge to get to places other than the university. There have been huge gaps in service. You can notice that on the Twitter service every day on the city website. So that's leading to a lot of drop buses. There have been service cutbacks as well. There's a lot of areas that aren't being served anymore. My neighbor asked me to mention that the 10 Imperial no longer stops outside the West End, directly outside the West End Community Centre. It's now stopping on the corner of Imperial, and you have to come up the way. Now, this centre has a therapy pool, and people like her with mobility issues, who due to stroke, arthritis, and injuries, go there to exercise in the warm water. The current 300-metre walk from the stop to the centre is fine if you're able-bodied. But if you have arthritis or if your balance is compromised due to age or injury, it becomes a lot more difficult, especially with the winter coming up the way that it is and having to deal with ice and snow. So these people might not actually be able to get out to the community centre to use the pool now, because a lot of them, limited budget, they can't afford to take a taxi. Because I hadn't really heard what's going on with the budget, I'm rather hoping that there's full service for the summer this year rather than having it cut back. There's a definite demand for that. People still have to get to work. People still have to get to their schools. They still have to get around the city. And it was shown through the need for all those helper buses that were going through last year, which seemed to be really inefficient, as you had 4 buses on half-hour service things rather than 3 if you just operate every 20 minutes. I know that transit is oriented to students here because of the numbers of people in the university, but what people tend to forget is that even though their other riders are fewer in number, each one contributes more money to the system in a year than each student. For example, based on the percent of my taxes that go to Guelph Transit and the amount I pay for monthly passes, I contribute as much money to transit annually as 4 students. So even people with subsidized passes contribute as much as 2 students over the course of a year. Therefore, for those 10 people that you see on the buses in the summer perhaps, they're equivalent financially to 20 to 40 students on that bus. So, and better yet, we use that bus all year round, so we help keep the system running. Yet it's our service that's cut most of the time, and I'm hoping that that won't happen this year. I'm really hoping as well that there could be money found, or during the route schedule it will help happen that there's improvement in Sunday service. People do shop and do errands on weekends. They do need to go to work still. They go to church, visit friends and relatives, and need to go to activities. And more frequent transit service on Sundays would make it easier for people to do these sort of things, especially if you could get it before 9 a.m. and after 7 p.m. There's a lot of things that I can't actually do because the service isn't available on Sundays. I know that Guelph has limited resources for public transit. I'm glad to see that there's a service review going there. Perhaps some of the available resources need to be used differently during the summer and on Sundays. If the university requires less service, what places do need it more? We heard about the industrial area. I can see people might want to be able to get out to the malls and the grocery stores and community centers, cinemas and parks more frequently. And there are a lot of people who still need to work on the summer. So remember, transit is a need, it's not a want. It helps alleviate poverty by providing a more affordable way of getting around the city. It helps the environment by getting cars off the road. People other than students do use the system. Their decisions to use it may be based on age, mobility, finances, environmental concerns, or need for transportation when the car is not available. Guelph Transit should be able to ensure that everyone can get around the city in a timely fashion. And please don't cut the budget. The main line has really helped improve the service around the university, so let's see if we can make it better for the rest of Guelph as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Is there any questions for Christine at this time? Seeing none, and thank you very much for coming. Stephen Petrick, and Stephen is also part of the Guelph Transit Advisory Committee as well. Chris Kelleher, you are in the wings. Yep, you're here. You're up next. Great, go ahead.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council, city staff, and members of the public, and Guelph Transit users. The Transit Advisory Committee is encouraged by the investment in the capital budget for additional buses and the replacement of aging buses, the addition of a vehicle to the mobility fleet, the implementation of transit priority measures, as well as upgrading of bus stops to include more shelters and benches. TAC is also looking forward to the replacement of the fare boxes and the development of a new fare strategy, which will make it easier for residents to use transit. New fare boxes and smart cards will also provide us with more accurate ridership numbers, helping place buses where they're needed the most. Going forward, to grow transit and transit frequency, there will be a need to invest more capital dollars sooner in the purchase of additional buses. Some TAC members recommend serious consideration be made to the purchase of I knew I was going to not get this word, articulated buses, bendy buses, and that transit also investigates electric buses, which could potentially reduce maintenance and operating costs. In regards to the operating budget, TAC is glad to hear that an agreement has been made between the ATU and the city with no serious service disruptions. We are also happy to hear that the past 2 summers of reduced summer service is history. Transit has informed us that the current schedules, except for U routes, will remain the current frequencies. There were some expectations. We are also looking forward to discussions of updating the transit master plan and also how we can contribute to the upcoming transit service review. There were also some expectations from the community and members of TAC that there would be some service improvements in this budget to address some of the concerns and issues that have risen from the realignment, such as longer transfer times and canceled routes due to various factors. Guelph Transit will indeed be making some additional tweaks and adjustments to routes this January. We do not know when these details yet, and we will know next week in our next meeting, and the public will know shortly. With that in mind, the following may or may not be addressed come January. There is still ongoing concern from riders regarding the community bus route. This route now uses regular-sized conventional buses instead of mobility-sized ones. Some community members expected frequency and service hours changes to this route in early 2018. If this is not part of the upcoming January service adjustment, we encourage council to provide additional funding to address those needs. Weekends suck. This is a direct quote from one of the members of TAC. The frequencies on weekends are inadequate, and there is still no Sunday evening or early morning service, despite the city growing by 20,000 people since 2006. To help bring frequency freedom to more parts of the city, a suggestion: make the 99 main line run every 15 minutes on weekends for the entire length of the route and not have it short turn at Guelph Central Station, confusing riders. If you don't know the current frequencies, you can ask me after. Increased frequency will increase ridership while also helping grow our economy, improve the environment, and connect people to community events typically held at Riverside Park on weekends. It should also be noted that due to the reduced holiday funding, there is now only one direct bus to Riverside Park and downtown on Canada Day. Again, another suggestion: increase that frequency to 30 minutes. This will help accommodate the increased crowds, divert traffic away from Riverside Park. If this can be done with the existing budget, fantastic. However, if it requires additional funding, we urge council to provide it. Public transportation makes Guelph more livable by providing freedom and mobility to our residents. And when people are given good transportation choices and frequent buses, they are more likely to forge new social and business relationships that improve the quality of life, gain a stronger sense of community, and strengthen economic development. The combination of a challenging economy and growing demands on taxpayer dollars is forcing policymakers like you to make tough choices between worthy causes. You should take heart. One cause merits investment, not just because it's worthy in itself, because it generates revenue for taxpayers rather than draining it away. The investment is public transportation. Public transit creates jobs, protects the environment, enhances our quality of life, and makes it easier for employees to get to work and consumers to get to local business. Earlier this year, we observed several council members and the mayor speak about the realignment and their expectations of more and better transit going forward, especially after the track record of the last 4 years. there are high expectations for many, for the 2019 and 2020 Guelph City budgets will address many of the ongoing issues riders are experiencing, and that there will be real growth of our transit service. And if you have a stronger economy, cleaner environment, and a healthier community is the destination we seek. Public transit is the fastest way to get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Councillor Ault.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Mr. Petrick. A couple of quick questions. I'm not certain that you know the answer to this one, but this will be a good way to prep Mr. Spicer for it. What is the cost of an electric bus? I appreciate your comment on that. I'm a big fan of them.
It varies, and I don't have an exact number yet.
I'll ask him. Does the Transit Advisory Committee have any statistics on the number of people that use the buses or would use the buses on Sunday to get to and from work? And I wish Mr. Mwanzia was here because I think he made a very important point about mobility of labor. So I'm curious about that particular point.
Don't have specific, I've heard about it for many years, like 20 years plus years. So it's something that's just been bubbling up and councils have just punted it down, and.
Can I answer that? Well, the Grey Cup's coming up.
John is my co-chair and he can answer that as well.
Okay, this is rather anecdotal, but I've had two kids who both had Sunday jobs, and in both cases, they couldn't get their jobs, or they had to to their jobs where they had to start by 11, for instance, and I had to end up driving them. And I mean, it's just one small thing, but plus I ride the same bus that many of the students do as well too, and there's a great need. There seems to be a great need for improved Sunday services, especially early and late.
Thank you. I'll ask Mr. Spicer later on if he knows any of the stats. I don't know whether they're out there actually. Okay, but thank you very much.
Councillor Hoffman.
Yes, thank you. Through Mayor Guthrie to Stephen. So I want to respect that you spend a lot of time with your advisory group putting this this list together, and thank you for delegating on behalf of the Transit Advisory Committee. So I just want to unpack some of them because I hear different stories. So the community bus route, its frequency is every hour, and your request would be to have it every 30 minutes?
That's correct. But it also doesn't run after, it runs from 8:30 to 5:30. Doesn't run on Sundays or holidays.
So it's Monday to Friday, 8:30?
Monday to Saturday.
Oh, Monday to Saturday. And then you talked about the weekends and the lack of service on the weekends. So that's because it stops at 5 o'clock on Sunday, and your advisory committee would like to see it run a regular scheduled day, like a Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday?
On a Saturday schedule, basically 5 a.m. till 12:15 a.m. roughly. Currently, it runs between 9:15 a.m. and 6:45, and that hasn't changed for well over a decade.
And that's what Christine was speaking to, because I think she talked about 7 o'clock. The main line no longer, I don't understand the language there about the short turn at the Guelph Central Station. I don't think I've been on the main line when it does a short turn. What does that mean?
On weekends, the main line is split in two. So from downtown to the University of Guelph and to Clare, it runs every 15 minutes. And from downtown to Riverside Park and Walmart, it runs every 30 minutes. And that's on weekends. And holidays, it's every 30 minutes from downtown to UG and every hour from downtown to Walmart.
Okay, thank you. And the Riverside Park, I thought we had several buses that ran to Riverside Park on Canada Day. I think you just suggested, I wrote down here that there was only one direct bus traveling to Riverside Park on Canada Day now?
Just during the regular day when you're going to the park, there's only that one direct bus that goes right at the entrance of Riverside Park. The 17 and 18, which are the loop buses, also serve the edge of Riverside Park, the far, far edge on Woodlawn. But because they don't go downtown anymore, where all the buses pretty well connect, you're looking at just one bus going to Riverside on an hourly basis on Canada Day. So in the past, there was 4 buses. After the fireworks are done, there are shuttle buses, obviously, which this council approved, so that's helpful. But getting to the getting to the Canada Day event is going to be difficult, and those buses are packed because I've been on them on Canada Day.
So, but that's the main line that you were specifically talking about, making it 30 minutes. But I think there would be some logistics there, because I believe that Woolwich Street is barriered off during.
It's barriered off there at a certain time. I think it's later in the afternoon, but they still run.
Yes, thank you for putting these points together, and we'll have an opportunity to verify all this information with staff during our budget discussion. So I thank you and the advisory committee.
Thank you, and that was it. So
okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chris Kelleher, you are up, and then Ted Pritchard, you are in the wings.
Thank you, Mayor Guthrie. Good evening, council, staff, media, and members in the gallery. I will be very brief and to the point. My name is Chris Kelleher, and I'm here before council this evening on behalf of all the residents who are working 60 hours per week or 2 jobs to make ends meet, our seniors, and for those that aren't comfortable coming before council in a forum like this to talk about rising taxes. To convey their concerns about rising taxes, obviously, I respectfully request council to investigate every aspect of this budget proposal for the potential savings I am confident that you might find. Those savings might be redirected in other areas that need more attention without raising taxes. I've heard in the past deliberations of this council a term that doesn't sit well with me, and with all due respect, I'll share it anyhow. I've heard the term, we've picked all the low-hanging fruit. Well, I respectfully request council to maybe get on a ladder and pick some of the high-hanging fruit that's there. And I was going to offer some suggestions this evening, but in good conscience I couldn't, because I don't have enough information to maybe share those ideas. But I truly believe that if this council, I would maybe challenge you to set a precedent for the next council, because this is your last budget process of this sitting council until the new council gets elected next year, that maybe set a precedent for future councillors or for future councils to really delve into all areas of the budget. And I know it's a lot of work to do that, but I'm sure that if you look hard, there are savings to be had, and that those savings can be utilized elsewhere in the budget. And I just thank you for your time and consideration. Like I said, it was very brief and to the point. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Any questions at this time? No. Oh, no. Thank you very much. And Ted Pritchard, you are up, and Susan Ratcliffe, I have seen you patiently waiting, so thank you. You're up in the wings. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you. Hello again, Mr. Mayor, councillors, and city staff. My name is Ted Pritchard, and I'm a lobbyist with the Fair Tax Campaign Guelph on behalf of condominium owners in Guelph. The condominium issue with multi-residential waste collection for the 2018 budget is well explained by staff on pages 1027 and 1028 of the operating budget. I'm sure I've said all of these things over the years, but never as eloquently argued as staff has for the 2018 budget. I'm very grateful to Cameron Walsh and Peter Brizzato, thank you, gentlemen, for their encouragement over the years and for their work this year in laying out the expansion service. I even learned a new word. I had to look up iterative. I think that's how you pronounce it. In my Webster's to find the word meant a repetition of an operation or procedure in order to achieve a desired result. So thank you for that, gentlemen. I'm also very pleased that Deputy CAO Scott Stewart is in that position he has in Guelph. A few years ago, Mr. Stewart brought front-end collection service to the city of Hamilton and the high-rise condominium residents that live there. His experience will be invaluable in ensuring the transition of these condominium owners in Guelph that have for too long missed out on three-stream collection service. For far too long, condominium garbage in all 3 streams has gone to landfill. The only true way to ensure this travesty stops is for the city to be the agent of solid waste collection for these condominium residents. Councillor Bell brought up an important issue. What if we build this and they don't come? We're expecting that on the basis of saving $10,000 or more a year in condominium fees, that condominium corporations will jump at the opportunity to receive city service. What if condominium owners are happy shoving all the garbage down the same chute in plastic bags to be delivered to landfill? Can we allow them to opt out of three-stream collection? Can the environment survive this condominium growth? Can we, I know that with the excellent staff like Heather Connell, Vivian De Giovanni, and Chad Scott, that I hope are still with the city, that they know what it takes to bring the concept of three-stream collection to all of Guelph. They authored the Solid Waste Management Master Plan that recommends a more inclusive collection system for the sake of the environment. Some condominium owners will have to be convinced to come over from the dark side, but you have the staff that knows how to do that. In answer to Councillor Bell's question, I don't know if, or I do know, if you don't build it, no one will come. First get the trucks and the training, and then cherry pick the condominiums, particularly the big ones with the new computer separator chutes, and then grow gradually from there. The whole first year is probably going to be implementation strategies as condominiums unload their private contracts. I want to say a word about city service fairness. As I look around the horseshoe, I believe I have about 11 of you who have expressed support for this issue in the past. There is a general agreement in the room that high-rise condominiums have received poor to no service for what they've paid for through their environmental portion of their condo fees. Not condo fees, their taxes, their environmental portion of their taxes. Most of us agree that the situation is unfair. Staff has presented you with a solution and a challenge. You have, in your vote on December the 5th, the chance to make this fair for as many as 6,000 Guelph residents. Remember that the 800,000 plus newfound impact money to make impact money from new tax assessment, at least half of that would come from new condominium developments. I hope we can collect their garbage. Another question, and I think the mayor has asked this. Why does it cost so much? $524,700. How did Barrie do it cheaper last year? I don't know. Front-end loader trucks cost about $220,000 and we need 2. There's also a 1.0 FTE of a driver and the cost of dumpsters. So $524,000 sounds about right. Thank you for your time, and I would entertain questions.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and I pretty much could say plural presentations over so many years, so thank you very much. And I don't know if you were here the last time when I asked that question. I believe about Barrie versus, it's funny that we're talking about Barrie again, but Barrie versus Guelph, but Barrie has a landfill. And that was the answer of the difference in costs between, which made sense to me. I believe I'm correct on that. Yeah, so that's the difference in cost there. Is there any questions, though, at this time for Mr. Pritchard? Councillor Hoffman.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Guthrie, to Ted. So, Ted, the last time you were here to present, you talked about being here about 10 years ago. And I went home and I was thinking about that because when you came 10 years ago, that was the first finance meeting that I chaired. And I walked through those doors and this gallery was full of people. You brought in, there was standing room only. So my question is, that was 10 years ago. You are here and we so appreciate you attaching yourself to this and really being an advocate. Are those people just tired of, do they presume that we're not going to push the yes button? Can you speak a little bit to that, Ted?
Yeah. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I remember the golden days of 10 years ago, and I don't know if you have actually worn them down, and it may be that case. I know the Fair Tax Committee has gone through an executive that's probably had 40 people on it over those 10 years, and we're back to 6. We're actually divided as a committee. We have townhouse condominiums who are really not interested in front-end loader trucks. So if I could have a process where somehow condominium townhouses could be offered 3-stream city collection that didn't involve carts, maybe I could get a few people in the gallery. I do have one, right? You're with me. Okay. So we've only brought out one tonight. You're right. And I sent out at least 74 emails to the condominium contacts to say it's important that we put people in the gallery. Councillors noticed that. I failed in that aspect of this position as chair of the Fair Tax Campaign. I don't have a single member of my Fair Tax Campaign executive in the gallery. So that was a good question. I'm at a loss to give you an answer. This is the year where we actually have a chance to do something. I mean, staff has put the trucks in the budget. They've thrown you the challenge. You're going to spend $550,000 odd and offer this service for condominium owners. They've told me for years they want it. They're not here tonight.
So may I just say, Ted, that I didn't ask the question to show that you failed.
No. I have a thick skin. I'm fine. It's through you, Mr. Mayor. I have a thick skin. I'm fine.
I think that you have done a tremendous job of shining a light on this issue. I really do. 10 years is a long time. But it's just, you know, we've got lots of things to juggle in the budget, as you're aware. We tell you this every year. And over $500,000 is a lot of money. And are we servicing 6,000 people? Are we going to make 6,000 people happy? And it just helps us to know what the effect of spending that money and the impact that we're going to have on taxpayers. But no, I didn't want you to think that I was criticizing you in any way. But I appreciate your tenacity. Thank you.
Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, just in answer to that, I was kind of having funny with it, but I was also being honest. I'm confused by this too. It is a big issue, or was a big issue. We would hold church meetings and we could get 150 people out without a problem. But that was 4 years ago. And that was 8 years ago, Mr. Guthrie, Mayor Guthrie, you were there. I'm not sure if I could fill up a church anymore. I also know that there are a lot of condominium people, and that was with Councillor Bell's question, or just a thought, that would just as soon just stuff everything into a plastic bag and get rid of it and send it off to landfill and have somebody with a pickup truck come through their townhouse condominium. And I don't think I want to allow them to do that. And maybe that's because I've become ornery, and as chair of this committee, maybe that's why they're walking away. But I think condominium owners have a responsibility to share in 3-stream collection just as the rest of the residents involved do.
So thank you very much for that. If it makes you feel any better, we had a ward town hall budget meeting and we only had 5 people.
You beat me by 4.
Well, thank you very much. And did you have a question? Okay, we'll just save it for later. And I had a budget meeting and 4 people showed up and 2 of them were my parents. So. No one can say I didn't care. So we're at the end. Susan Watson is not able to be here tonight, so Susan Ratcliffe will be our last delegation tonight. So welcome, Susan, and
there's a burden.
and I'll turn it over to you.
I was going to thank you for having the courage to end with the 2 Susans as we're sometimes called. So it looks like I've got the whole burden of being Susan on my back. I'm not here really to save puppies, but perhaps I might raise the rooster today, since this was a big day for the rooster raising. But I'd like to preface my specific comments with reference to your remarks, Mayor Guthrie, as quoted in an article in Guelph Today on November 14th. You said, "My goal is to get this budget lower. We need to make sure that we're trying to get it down closer to the rate of inflation. That's the reality that taxpayers are living in." And I want to challenge you and your councillors on this attitude, because I believe it has the wrong focus in these deliberations. Your goal should not be to get this budget lower. Your goal should not focus on the taxpayers of Guelph, but on the citizens of Guelph and the community in which we want to live. I ask you all to consider the community good rather than just tax cuts and numbers. A vibrant community is what attracts business to our community. That is not a soft factor in our lives. But I would like to focus on two particular areas of the budget: the vacant unit tax rebate and the planning department processes that have caused a misuse of our resources. I'm here to support the immediate elimination of the vacant unit tax rebate, as many other communities have done, and the redirection of savings from that program into a heritage tax incentive program. This will prevent demolition by neglect, and the immediate savings of $470,000, according to the staff report, and a further saving in 2018, would go a long way to help preserve and enhance our city's heritage. Since 2010, more than $6,200,000 of tax money have been given for these tax rebates for empty buildings. The Petrie Building's amazing transformations should be the only proof you need on the advantages of investing in heritage for our city's economic growth and its stature not only in Ontario, but across Canada. The upper floors of the Petrie Building were empty for more than 100 years. Imagine the tax rebate on that. And now they'll be home to at least 5 new businesses who have been attracted from other cities, not because of taxes, but because of the building's distinctive heritage. And I've talked to them and I know that. Our heritage attracts not only business investment, but also tourists. I congratulate you on the recent designations of the Cutton House, the former Woods Factory, and Kelly's Inn. Part of the tax savings from the vacant rebate program could be used for developing several other key designations of important heritage buildings. My second point is a cautionary tale. Last Friday, I sat through 5 hours of OMB hearings on the application to develop 75 Dublin Street, a development that, just to editorialize, that would destroy our city's most iconic viewscape. I watched as 5 lawyers spent the whole day arguing the fine points of this appeal, a day that probably cost more than $15,000, a cost incurred because the planning department and this city council did not follow the required processes as outlined in the Planning Act. Several more costly days will be necessary to decide the outcome of these appeals to the OMB. If staff and city council would take more care for due process, the tax savings could have been significant. So I urge you to listen to the citizens of Guelph who care about their community, rather than appealing to the anonymous taxpayers who don't show up to your meetings and only care about the bottom line. And a final word of advice: if you want to save $7 million, don't build the Niska Bridge. Everything in.
Okay, any questions, but I will caution council that you should not speak in regards to what's before the OMB hearing. And actually, some of the comments I heard about it, I want to reiterate that that is your opinion. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for your presentation. I am intrigued about your comment about the Heritage Tax Incentive Program. I can see its merits. Can you point us towards any other practices in other communities that have had successes with this?
There are several. The one that I'm most familiar with is St. Mary, or the ones St. Mary's, Stratford, Cobourg, and Port Hope, and they give, usually the range is between 30 and 40% tax rebate to owners of heritage properties, because those properties are considered a community benefit, and they draw people in. If you've been to Cobourg, you know that that's why people come to the town. And so property owners keeping up their properties is helped a little bit by this kind of heritage tax incentive. And it pays itself back, usually $6 to every one that's invested. So it's a value in terms of economic development. And we've talked about it when I was on Heritage Guelph for 10 years. We have talked about it for quite a while. So here's some money now that's available and could go towards that.
Thank you. I look forward to learning more about that.
And seeing nothing further, thank you very much. Okay, everybody, that is it. Thank you for the delegations that came tonight. We appreciate it. So what I want to do now is go back to us where we can ask some follow-up questions to staff. Let this just be, if we could, just questions to staff. And remember, there is the budget board, right? So maybe you could just say, I'm going to be asking this, and then everyone knows. And then, so after we're done questions, then I'll do the intentions at the end. Is that's good, eh? Okay? So questions to staff on maybe the delegations that we had tonight. Sure, Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. I have questions, I believe, for Mr. Thompson and for Mr. Spicer. And since I think I saw Mr. Spicer way up at the back, I'll give him a chance to get down and go to Mr. Thompson.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Councillor Alt. So just so council knows, and just for process-wise and protocol, we should always go through the Deputy CAO of the department, okay?
Okay, I'm not certain that I can on this one though, because it's a
well, that would be up for the Deputy CAO of the department to decide, not you.
I will then ask Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, the concern that was raised by one of the delegates is that, in fact, there is an implication that staff is not managing our operating and our capital budgets properly.
So I'm going to clear it up, and I'm sorry for my interruption to you. I was more specifically talking about transit. If it's a transit question, it goes through our deputy CAOs.
Oh, fine. Sorry, I apologize.
Yep.
Then I can go back to Mr.
The other
Thompson.
question absolutely goes to our CAO. I can see where you're going with that. That goes to our CAO.
Mr. Thompson masquerading as Mr. Lee. There you go, or the other way around. I was wondering if you could comment on the suggestions that there are, in fact, questions that could be asked about how staff is managing our operating and capital budgets.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Alt, I just by way of clarification, I'm going to suggest that you may be speaking to Mr. Fung's presentation around the BMA.
That's correct, yes.
So the commentary I might add would be something like this. So to Mr. Fung's own admission, the BMA study is complicated and it has a lot of different inputs into it. And it is not an apples to apples comparison across municipalities. It serves as a guideline for us to ask questions and consider. We also use it as part of our service review framework to look at different aspects when we start to review service. That's true. I would suggest to you, though, like many municipalities, like this council does, you make policy decisions based on your community, and they're not standard across the 444 municipalities across Ontario. Those also have cost implications as it relates to different policy decisions, and that's why it's not an apples-to-apples comparator. This council's been brave and given us a mandate to do service reviews. We're doing that. You saw the recent waste review. 5 of those services were found to be efficient. 1 we need to do some work on. There's some policy development that's coming out of the Ontario government, which has just been announced around what does that look like. And then the other suggestion I might add from Mr. Fung is that on the fire question, I would suggest that he go review some of the most recent interest arbitration awards across this province and understand why it is not an apples to apple compared to around fire costs in Ontario. And interest arbitration are all publicly available for him to go review, and he can see for himself around how labor, specifically fire, is treated across municipalities. And that would be an interesting concept. As you know, we often communicate to you around the results of interest arbitration on specifically fire. And we've lobbied AMO and suggested that there's changes needed in that labor practice in Ontario, and for many of the good reasons Mr. Fung has attributed to some of the remarks he's made. What I can assure you, though, is that this staff do an excellent job at preparing a budget for you. It's been said tonight, I'll reiterate it again. Staff were given a 0.5% mandate to come in at, excluding compensation. Well, if we use the acronym of what's cost of living, 0.5 is way below cost of living, so staff naturally had to adjust, move. So looking at particular things in isolation doesn't work if you were given a holistic mandate to come into, and that's what the staff did. I'm proud of the work they did. Executive team reviewed the budget they came in with, and we have nothing but praise for our staff to be able to come in at that level. We believe that we've given you a prudent budget to consider. We've also given you expansions to consider, and of course, you also have a mandate to stick with your financial plan around infrastructure development. That's before you for you to make a decision.
Thank you very much. I did want to get a second opinion on that, because I do respect Mr. Fung, and also coming forward and stating quite clearly we need to live within our means. It's clear from what you've stated that any decisions on expansions are a consequence of council making determinations, which is council's will to do, and I appreciate that. Moving to the next question for, I believe it's Ms. Clack, it's with regards to transit. There are a number of issues related to transit that I wanted to deal with, but I'm going to try to deal with them all in one question. They come from various speakers, and I wish in some senses that Mr. Mwanzia was still here, because the issue relates to service and efficiencies that were, and they're all related in so many ways. Is it true that the University of Guelph is our second largest employer, first of all? Do you know that? Because I believe that we're sending a tremendous number of buses up to the University of Guelph right now. The context is that it was stated that we need to get buses out to employers because we need mobility of employment. And that's why all these questions will be the same. Sunday employment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
So through the Mayor to Councillor Alt, I can't ask about the size of the employer base. I don't know if others can. Certainly from a ridership point of view, yes, the university represents our largest percentage of riders. Okay, that's fine, and I get that. The other question is related to those working on Sundays. Do we have any stats on the number of people who want to use the buses or do use the buses on Sundays? Through the Mayor to Councillor Alt, no, not that we can answer at this point. That would be all some of the work that we would do through the service review when we're looking at our ridership across all days of the week. Okay, and I presume a number of the other questions that I want to ask with relationship to electric buses, so on and so forth, would all be part of the service review then? Through the Mayor to Councillor Alt, yes, I mean, certainly Mike is here if there are specific technical questions I can't answer, but in a general sense, most of the questions that have been raised tonight by the delegates and that I imagine Council may ask are exactly what we want to address through the service review. With the ratification of our agreement, this now puts us in a position where we can move forward with transit in a positive way. Also launched the service review at the beginning of 2018 so that we can begin to answer many of those questions. And so it is certainly our recommendation as staff that we pause any contemplation of a change in routes or service until we have the opportunity for that service review to feed those results back to us. And so that would be where we would be looking at all those stats, as well as where we can change bus depending on day of week. All of those questions will be answered through the service review.
And that sums up everything I wanted to ask in one question. Thank you.
Thank you, and over to Councillor Gibson.
Yeah, thank you. Well, do you know, I just a comment at the end. I'll save my comment for the end. Thank you.
Questions only at this time. Councillor Hoffman.
Sorry, through Mayor Guthrie, did you say I have questions and intentions? You want me to do my questions first?
Yeah, we'll just go through the questions of what the delegations had, or maybe there's something that you just need to bring up that you didn't hear, but then we'll do intentions at the end.
Okay, I can save my intentions. So my questions are also around transit, so they would be directed to Ms. Clack. So tonight we heard from the Transit Advisory Committee, and I asked Stephen to repeat some of the concerns around service delivery, efficiencies, etc. My first question would be, Ms. Clack, are any of those concerns being addressed in the budget that we're going to be approving on December the 5th?
No, through the mayor to Councillor Hoffland, no changes are being recommended in the budget that you're considering on December the 5th.
But isn't there, for example, aren't we purchasing a community bus? That's one of the concerns was about the community bus. Was that in this budget didn't we approve one in the capital?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, it was the purchase in 2018 for service in 2019. It takes a year for the bus to be purchased.
Oh, I guess I didn't know that. So we're buying it next year. We've given you the money to go out and buy it, but we won't have it operational till 2019, which will tie in, of course, then with the service review.
That is correct.
Okay. So hearing a lot about the service review, and I'm believing that that's starting next year, early in the year. So the Transit Advisory Committee, will they be entering into dialogue when it comes to the service review?
Through the mayor to Councillor Hoffland, absolutely. We'll have a number of stakeholders who will bring input into that service review, and I would foresee that the Transit Advisory Committee would be part of that.
That's great, thank you. And so the points that were reiterated tonight have been captured by staff. Thank you.
Before I go to Councillor Downer, is it your question in regards to transit as well, or do you mind if I just do a follow-up? Thank you. Just as a follow-up, I did put this on the message board. I don't know if anyone saw, and I had a discussion with Councillor Hoffman and Councillor Gordon about this. The opportunity that I'm looking for is that the service review starts in early next year. So let me step this as questions. When do you think it may be accomplished? Like, when do you think we might get the final recommendations from staff?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
As you know, we have an expansion package before you to support the service review.
Yep.
We've said that we need that money to continue the work on the service review. We believe it's a 12-month process with the amount of input that we're going to get. So we believe it'll be the end of 2018, potentially the first of 2019. However, we have suggested that expansion package is critical to continuing that work and the specialized consulting we may need for that review.
Okay, where I was going with that was, I thought if maybe the service review was done in July, let's say, and then we could earmark, just making up numbers here, $500,000 in a reserve account that could be put aside, and then that way, conditional upon us approving the recommendations and any service enhancements that could come out of it, then there would be money allocated in 2018. Very similar to the library motion, okay, right, earlier. So I guess if it's going to be a whole year, then that would be something, I'll take that offline then. I'll take it offline, everybody, to discuss that. I guess I just thought that if there was an opportunity for service enhancements, we could look at a reserve fund or something to set aside on that. But I'll take it offline to have go further. I'll go to Councillor Downer, then over to you. Okay, do you mind, Councillor Downer, just for a moment? Similar? Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the last question you asked, and I know it was on a radar, but I somehow missed that it might take a year for that service review, which begs the question that I think a lot of our transit advocates will be asking in our community, is that I'm sure I'm not alone around this horseshoe of calls we're getting about the perception that there are now inefficiencies. There are, with our attention on the main line, some people view that as at the expense of some of the peripheral routes that they're finding gaps in. Does that mean that we're going to wait a whole year before any of those are addressed?
Through you, Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Like to respond?
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Gordon. So we've been fairly clear that we believe the transit review will take a year. It's complicated. Everything from routes, rationalization, costing. We want to make sure we do it right. I think transit would agree that we've done the best we can within the existing budget that we have. We've identified some tweaks that we may be able to do. But it's time that transit had a thorough review of the routes and the efficiencies so that, quite frankly, what you will get is the best possible service. And I think I don't want to rush it. I want to make sure we take the time, get the expertise, and make sure that once and for all, we get a transit system that actually is efficient and we've done it right, and that's going to take time for us to do that. And we think it's about a year.
I appreciate that. Thank you. I guess the follow-up then would be, when the 99 main line was rolled out, I think that transit, and through Mr. Spicer, there were comments that, okay, we've changed the system. As we hear from the community, we're going to be tweaking it. And does it, no tweaks for a year? Or what does that mean?
Through the Mayor to Councillor Gordon, no, absolutely not. We continue to tweak the system, and that's the expertise that Mike and his team bring forward, and we're still doing that even within this budget year. And so we will continue to make adjustments to the system to address needs. Into 2018 and through 2018, we're talking about more of the holistic, large-scale changes to the system that we're going to wait for the results of the service review. But absolutely, it is the course of doing business of transit that we do make those tweaks and adjustments as we need to.
Thank you.
And thank you for that follow-up question, Councillor Gordon. Now, Councillor Downer, you've been so kind, but I had a whole bunch of hands go up all around transit. So maybe if you don't mind, I'll just stick on the transit theme, okay? Councillor McKinnon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just something to inform my deliberations on the budget about transit. I just wanted to confirm through staff that the service review will be reviewing rates, which include cash rates as well as the affordable bus pass in particular.
Through the Mayor to Councillor McKinnon, yes, that would be part of the review under the fare strategy piece.
Excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Salisbury.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if staff could speak to the expansion with regards to the service review in terms of the impact that that's going to have. Is a two-part question. One of the things I'm really looking at is would additional funds for additional services, whatever may be needed, give us something sooner than the one-year timeline? Are we looking at what's the impact of say, not approving the expansion package as we have, and is there something that we don't have that would allow us to get these results a little bit more timely?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, I would simply say no, just to get right to the point. We've done a lot of learning in the pilot called Solid Waste Business Service Review this year, so when we were handed that hot potato here in January, we've learned a lot since then. And if you could bring, I think you could put a number of consultants at the table. You've still got to get through the information. So I don't think in any way it wouldn't get you 1 year becoming 2 months.
No.
You know, it might become 11 months, but so I still think we're into, because you've got to go through it, you've got to explain it to stakeholders, you know, that's all the learnings that we had along the way. There's industry associations, and in this particular case, you have an advisory committee. They're also going to have to be brought along from an education perspective. We spend a lot of time with the union reps in CUPE, and in this case it would be ATU. That takes an awful lot of work, because then they want to have discussions at the national level. So you get the information, and then you have to share it in lots of places, and I don't see any way of really speeding that up significantly.
And last on this, I had Councillor Ault.
Thank you. Mine is very quick, but it might involve an elaborated answer. Through you to Ms. Clack, it's regarding transit again. What do we mean by a tweak? And I really am hoping that we can get a sense of what the scale of a tweak is, as opposed to a significant route shift or scheduling shift.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe the word tweak is not the proper word, but we are reviewing all of our boardings, all of our ridership, the areas of the city that are demanding our service levels to increase, and that is where we will target. Back in June, when I introduced the concept to you in regards to convenience routes, those are those low ridership routes that are still required in the community, and we often base those results like we do with the 99 main line, which is not a fair analogy. We're hoping the service review will allow us the opportunity to be able to come up with a more scientific way that we can evaluate our system, understand the changing demographics that I heard earlier, the changing travel patterns of our community, and be able to address those service levels, rather than hear that this street is underutilized and this street is overutilized and then staff react. We are looking for a better way long term to make our system stable. In the short term, in 2018, we definitely know that we are still struggling on the 99 main line. We are probably leaving 5 to 6 loads a day still on the sidewalk. And there's other areas of the city that we're missing transfers. So our planning staff right now are working on that and coming up with plans for the January board to address some of that, this review, so that it's a more stable process.
Thank you very much for that answer. I think that will probably relieve a number of people thinking that nothing is going to be happening for some time. I can far more easily dovetail what you stated with what Mr. Thompson has stated about the service review than just a tweak. And I know we use the term tweak, but it scared the living